Hello, I'm back for another live video, and I just realized that, come on, I actually was nervous talking about this. But the topic for today is, again, that sense of identity, that perceived sense, who am I, right? And attachment. This is a very complex topic, and I know sometimes people misunderstand it, and sometimes people might get a bit upset with me the way I view this. But I'm hoping that you can listen to this with openness, right? Because perhaps this is you too, right? I spent decades searching or trying to find out, who am I, right? When you had lots of trauma and abuse throughout childhood, this kind of feels like it's shattered. It's like I didn't know where I was starting or beginning and where I ended, right? When people constantly violate your boundaries in unspeakable ways, right? This all gets really blurred. Where am I? Where are they? Right? Perhaps you can relate. Right? And if you can, please let me know too. So, and if you're live with me here with me, then please leave some comments and ask some questions, or in the replay as well, because this can really derail our life. This can really affect our life in very deep ways. Like it affects every single relationship we have, whether this is an intimate relationship, whether this is a friendship that's with family members, co-workers, even a shop assistant, right, that we don't really know very well. It really affects the way we interact with other people, right? If I, for example, I'm speaking from my own experience here, so perhaps you don't think the same way as I did. But by the time I got into adulthood, I really thought I am fundamentally flawed. There is something fundamentally wrong with me, and this is why those things happened. This was my belief, and there was no shaking about it. I was absolutely certain that this had to be the case. Even when I was in therapy, I would be defending that. I would fight for this, that this is a fact. Right. And in this video, because someone asked about attachment, right? And I wanted to spin that a little bit and talk about attachment in that regard, thinking about our sense of self, that identity that we have, right? Because I had a very strong identity, a very strong attachment to that identity that I created for myself, who I thought I was, that broken being, that fundamentally flawed being, who only bad stuff happens to, right? And yes, I had some nice people in my life, but I had this really strong belief also that if people would be in my in my surroundings, or if they would spend enough time with me, eventually they will find out my flaws. They will see it, right? They might not wrap it up. Eventually they find out, and then they will reject me, and then the same thing would happen again, right? And it is really difficult to create a different life experience when you're really attached to those kind of beliefs and that perception of yourself, that identity of yourself, right? So for me, this was decades not letting go of that, because I thought this is fundamental, right? This cannot be changed. So I had a lot of professional help there to really loosen that up a little bit and realize that my identity is not something that is fixed, right? I can change that, right? This is a letting go, me not being so attached to that, because my whole life was built around this concept that I'm fundamentally flawed. The way I approached everything in my life, the way I looked after this body, right? Also reflected that I thought there was something wrong and I just couldn't care less about my body, right? So everything centers around this, and I think this is where we need to shine the light to. And it's like, is this still serving me? That's what I had to keep asking myself, right? Yes, I get where this comes from. I get where these beliefs and concepts come from. I get why this is so strong, right? I get how much all this hurt me. But does it serve me now? Do I want tomorrow to be the same as today? And that meant that I actually had to face this real difficult inner turmoil, right? That shame, that embarrassment, that anger, all those difficult emotions within me, right? We have, after the trauma, actually had to go and, so to speak, sit with those emotions, allow them to be, experience them, right? Because in childhood, when all this trauma and abuse happens, it was not a safe space to actually experience those emotions, to allow them to pass on their own course, right? We had to push a lid on, right? We had to push them down. We had to do that to actually be able to still keep functioning, right? Because we had to still go to school. There was no such thing as sick leave or something, right? or anything. We still had to go, right? There was a lot of things that we still had to do. Okay, so to always acknowledge. Now, every time when we find something about ourselves, right, that we created that sense of self around me, that I am a victim, right, that it's a victim mentality in a sense, right? And to acknowledge that, knowing where this comes from, right? I think this is always the first step. This is so important to really validate that for ourselves, right? No one ever done that for us, right? And sometimes it's a therapist who's the first person who can do that for you, right? If you can't do that for yourself just yet. But to really hold that, pause there for a little bit and really acknowledge that for yourself. Okay, this is where this comes from. And then looking at, okay, how else could I think about myself? How do other people think about me? Perhaps you have one friend, or maybe perhaps it is a therapist that you really cannot. How do you see me? Right. And believing that, right? Because our mind is so quick, and as like I said, I had this strong belief that if that friend is around long enough with me, eventually they'll find out about that fundamental flaw that I had, right? So, but we're trying to realize that this is a belief, right, that I attached to for a reason, right? To protect me, to keep me safe. Right? This was a safety mechanism. That's where the attachment comes in. That's why it's such a strong toxic bond to this belief, right? And that we really want to challenge, right? To really shine a light on this and realize, oh, this is why this is there, right? And what else, or how else could I think about myself? How else could I see this? Right? And to just explore it. You don't have to believe it or to shift it or change, just to explore it and feel into your body. What would those other perceptions be like? No one has to know about this, right? Because it could almost be shame associated with that too, allowing myself to feel good about myself. Oh, this feels really uncomfortable. This feels new. This doesn't feel right, right? To know that this is going to come up, because the old way of being, even knowing it's very self-destructive, or it was for me at least, right, and very uncomfortable and horrible. It created a lot of suffering for me. But I was so familiar with that. I knew this suffering. This was my life, decades of suffering, right? And there is a certain, I don't know, I don't like the word comfort for that. I'm missing a word here. Maybe you can help me in the comments. It's not comfort, it's a familiarity. I so know that territory of suffering, right? This is me, right? And I created an identity around this. I created that sense of self around the suffering. This is all I knew. Right. Now exploring a different sense of self, a different perception, will create that unfamiliar, uncomfortable, and very difficult kind of emotional thing as well. But knowing that it is safe for me to do this right now. Right, to realize that, yeah, my mind will try to tell me all sorts of things, but right here, I'm home by myself. I'm just exploring. I'm not in any immediate danger. No one even knows that I'm doing this. Right, to really just allow yourself to explore that, because as we're moving further, especially on the spiritual path, then you realize that the sense of identity, it is all just concepts. It's all fake, right? No matter what you believe, whether you believe you're really good or you're really bad, it's just a belief, right? It has nothing to it. There's nothing more to it, right? It's there's so much more to identity that we can't or want go into in this video, because I try to keep it short to just show you how we attach to this attempt. We almost have a toxic relationship with our identity that we formed through all those years of abuse, right? And that's what we want to shine a light on, right? So I just wanted to focus on that, and let me know in the comments, right? What comes up for you when you're hearing that? That's because it was very challenging for me to shift out of that, to let go of some of those identities that I had, and I thought, right, they're me. There's no ways about it. I cannot change it, and I did. but just want to put that out there. So, but with that, as always, sending you lots and lots of love and rainbows to brighten up the tough times just a little. See you guys. Bye.